Welcome to what Batman vs Superman should be about. If you've seen my What Star Wars 7 should be about video, then you'll know that I don't just list what I think should and shouldn't be in the movie, but I take all of those points and I weave them together into an actual story, a fan fiction, of what I hope the movie will be. So I'm going to tell this to you as a story, but as we go along I'm going to be throwing up notes from time to time, explaining why I've made certain creative decisions that I have, or how a certain element of the story will fit in with either past or future movies. So, let's begin with one of those notes. As many of us already know, Zack Snyder has said that he'll be pulling certain elements from the graphic novel Dark Knight Returns. So I've tried to do the same thing. And one thing that is a big theme in the graphic novel is the role of the media. The story is continually cycling back to news reports, on the streets interviews, current affairs show, interpreting and discussing the events that are unfolding in the story. Public opinion is a big theme in that graphic novel. Hence, in my version, the media will also play a big role, as Superman's public image after the events of Man of Steel has been discussed in real life, so reflecting that in this movie seems appropriate. The movie begins small, with a current affairs discussion show with two sides arguing about Superman. Can we really trust someone with that much power? Well, you know, he did save the planet. Well, we wouldn't have needed saving in the first place if he never came here. Plus, he doesn't belong here, he's an alien. Hey, since he's been in Metropolis, crime has been cut in half. How is that a bad thing? Yeah, you know, all the criminals are probably afraid of this alien swooping down on top of them. Maybe we should be too. The host then cuts in and says, well, we have a special guest, someone that many people consider to be the smartest man alive, the owner and CEO of LexCorp, Mr. Lex Luthor. Lex is probably going to be played by either Mark Strong or Bryan Cranston. They seem to be the front runners at the moment. I'd be happy with either one, but I'm going to use pictures of Mark Strong to represent Lex, just because there's a lot more pictures of him being bald than there is of Bryan Cranston. Also, something that's going to be going on in the background during the first half of this movie is whenever there's a news report on, they're going to mention a volcano that's about to erupt in the area around Hawaii, and how the nearby town is being evacuated. That'll come into play in the second half of the movie, so just having that info floating around in the background in the first half would be good. And also, perhaps if the pro-Superman person on this current affairs show could mention that Superman did help to rebuild Metropolis after the events of Man of Steel, flying in building materials, helping to prop back up some of those buildings that he punched over in the last movie. That would really help to improve his image, which is one of the things that this Batman-Superman movie is going to need to do. So Lex comes on the show and he actually starts defending Superman. What? He says, look, whether we want Superman here or not, one thing's for sure, we're not the only ones in the universe anymore. We don't know who else is out there, how they're going to view us, which is why it's nice to know we have a Superman in our corner. Then the anti-Superman guest can say, let me just ask you flat out, Mr. Luthor, do you trust this alien? Lex stares straight down the camera lens. Yes, I do. The host thanks him for his time and turns to the camera and says, well, that seems to be the question on everyone's mind. Can we trust Superman to always do what's right, especially when there's nothing and no one to keep him in check? Hint, hint. Now we get our first glimpse of Superman, floating out in space right in front of the sun. He's floating there, soaking up the sun's rays, and he's got his eyes closed, and he's kind of like meditating. Considering that Man of Steel had Superman almost suffocate when he was breathing a different atmosphere while in Zod's ship, that now poses a problem for Superman to be in space, because if he can barely survive a different atmosphere, how are we going to explain him surviving in the vacuum of space for an extended period of time with no atmosphere at all? So I've written it that his body is still developing, and he has discovered that he can go without air for a long period of time if he can absorb enough energy beforehand. In fact, this point will go on to solve a problem that'll occur later in the movie. While Superman's floating out there, he starts to get these flashes of memories. Memories of Zod's face, the sound of his neck cracking, his body hitting the floor. These images jolt Superman awake again, and his eyes snap open. This is so important that we see Superman being affected by what happened in the last movie. Superman killing Zod must be not only addressed, but resolved in this movie if his character is going to move forward, which we will see in this version. Superman then returns to Earth and flies down to a military base and drops in on the general from the first movie. These two talk, giving us a bit of exposition, explaining that the scout ship that Zod crashed towards the end of Man of Steel has now been claimed by the US government, and that Superman has made a deal with them that he would allow them to keep the scout ship and he would help them to unravel some of the secrets of the Kryptonian technology, on the condition that he can gut the ship of all its weapon systems first. Superman feels that since they have to trust him to do the right thing with all of his power, that it's only fair that he should trust them to do the right thing with the power that comes from this Kryptonian technology. technology. But the General starts like trying to talk him into sharing the weapons systems, saying that they'd probably need it if Zod's people ever find a way to escape from the Phantom Zone. Right then Lex walks in, and he's like, "Hey, shut up, General, that wasn't part of our deal. Superman kept his word, we need to keep ours." Superman and Lex shake hands like they're best friends. And we're like, what? Because we all know there's no way that they would ever be real friends. This has to be some kind of scam of Lex. So Superman and Lex start walking through the base, heading down towards where the scout ship is kept, and Lex casually mentions how it's gotten a bit more difficult for him to do his work because the military's tripled the security around here. He leans in and says to Superman, "Look, between you and me, even though there's no weapons in this ship, a lot of this stuff could be altered to create weapons. I could create quite a few just from what I've already seen. I'm sure there's probably other people that could too. That's why we need to make sure that nobody gets in here and steals any of this stuff. That could be really bad." But their conversation is cut short when Superman hears sirens going off in the distance. And he's like, "Gotta go," whoosh, like he normally does. This then leads into a classic Superman scene of him saving like a baby from a burning building. And he does it just as you would expect Superman to do it. He goes and gets the kid, returns it to the parents. They're like, "Oh, thank you, Superman." The crowd starts clapping, all the reporters are there, like, "Superman, Superman, you get a comment." Then he flies off. This scene then cuts immediately, and we go from this happy, slightly cheesy Superman scene, and we plunge into the dark, dingy streets of Gotham City, where another young child is in peril, only this time it's in a scene taken direct from Dark Knight Returns, where the three gang members have kidnapped a child, and they're saying how they're going to kill the kid once they got the money, and then Batman busts in, and he's like bashing these guys up, he's like breaking bones, he's like throwing batarangs through people's hands. Brutal stuff. Once he gets the kid, he leaves, he puts it on the parents' doorsteps, rings the bell, and then disappears into the night. The parents open the door and they're like, "Our baby on!" And they look around for whoever brought the kid, but he's gone. So in these two contrasting scenes, the big difference in style between Batman and Superman is shown. It's like day and night. Superman is in the public eye, whereas Batman is in the shadows. And no one even knows for sure whether Batman exists or not. Yes, this Batman is still thought of as an urban myth. He's been operating in complete ninja secrecy for a number of years. But through all of this scene of Batman rescuing the kid, we never actually see Batman properly. We just see like his outline or the shadow of him, just to build up the anticipation for when we finally see the Batfleck. Now is when things really start to heat up. Lex Luthor steps out of a helicopter and walks into a fenced-off facility. This one's different from the one where the scout ship was, as that was in Metropolis while this place is in the middle of nowhere. Lex is met by this chick who's like his right hand, his number one assistant. Lex swipes a security card in a slot, and this big metal door slides open to reveal one of the Matrix eggs that was in the scout ship. Yes, LexCorp reached the crashed scout ship before anyone else did, and they were able to salvage a single egg, just one egg, that survived that crash, which is now growing in a maturation tube type thing, which is like a hybrid of Kryptonian and human technology kind of mashed together, because Lex, being the genius that he is, of course is smart enough to build something like that and integrate it with alien technology. But it's still kind of glitchy, so while this baby egg has been growing, it's a little bit sort of misshapen as a result. Lex's assistant looks at it and kind of goes, "It looks a bit bizarre." Bizarro! Lex is growing Bizarro from an egg he salvaged from the crashed scout ship. And of course, it's growing at an accelerated rate, because it would have to, because otherwise we need to wait 20 years before Bizarro could actually do anything. Meanwhile, over at the Daily Planet, everybody's running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Why? Because the Daily Planet has just been bought, and the new boss is about to arrive. And everybody's worried that they might get downsized, and we can have a little bit of office banter between Lois and Perry, and that chick who's called Jenny Olsen. So I don't know if she's supposed to be Jimmy Olsen's sister, or if it's like a gender swap of Jimmy Olsen to Jenny Olsen, or I don't know. I don't know why they didn't just make this guy Jimmy Olsen. He kind of fits the role, he's just a bit older. But anyway, somebody shouts, "He's here! He's here!" And in walks Bruce Wayne. The Daily Planet has been bought by Wayne Enterprises. A while back, the president of Warner Brothers said that he understands why some people are skeptical about Ben Affleck as Batman, but that when we see what they're doing with the story, then we'll understand that Ben Affleck is the perfect person to play this version of Batman. Now, yeah, he was probably just saying that to get everyone to stop being so negative about Ben Affleck, but giving him the benefit of the doubt, I have tried to think of what kind of a Batman would be perfect for someone like Ben Affleck to play, and the only thing I can really come up with is if they're going to make it it that Batman has exaggerated out the Bruce Wayne persona to like an extreme, so that when Batman puts on the Bruce Wayne personality, he kind of becomes like the Tony Stark of the DC universe. Now that's something that Ben Affleck would do a good job of, and considering how Warner Brothers is just following in the footsteps of everything that Marvel does, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they end up doing exactly that. And there is a semi-solid basis for this in the comics. Batman is very meticulous in crafting the Bruce Wayne persona into the perfect cover. The type of women he dates, the parties he goes to. He even takes it to the point where he swaps his alcohol for apple cider so that people think he's drinking when he actually isn't, and he sometimes pretends to be drunk. And you know, it has been said that the one thing that the DC Universe is missing is a Tony Stark type character that can draw in the crowds. But the difference between Tony Stark and Bruce Wayne as the billionaire playboy would be that with Tony Stark, that's who he really is, but with Bruce Wayne, it's all just an act. Kind of like how the bumbling Clark Kent is all an act for Superman, which is one thing that Superman will be learning from Batman in this version. So I'm going to write Bruce Wayne, assuming that that's the direction they're going to go with when it comes to Batfleck. I don't know if it's a really good idea, but I could see them doing something like that. So Bruce Wayne walks in like a rock star with an entourage, and all the girls in the office start cheering. And Bruce Wayne gives a speech about how people are buying less papers now because of the internet and all that, and they have to change with the times, blah blah blah. But of course the real reason he's here is because Superman is based in Metropolis and he wants to keep tabs on him through the Daily Planet. And let's not forget, in Man of Steel it was made public knowledge that Lois Lane knows Superman's identity. So Bruce Wayne wants to get access to her more than anyone else. So after his speech he pulls Lois aside and he immediately starts flirting with her, and he's like, "Hey, I'm throwing a party tomorrow night here at my penthouse here in Metropolis. Why don't you come by?" And she's like, actually I'm dating someone right now." "Oh, who?" "Oh, a new guy that started working here, Clark Kent." Yes, they are dating on the regular now. When it comes to the Lois and Clark relationship, we're pushing full steam ahead, so that by the second or the third solely based Superman film, they'll be getting married, like they are in the comics. We're not going to waste any time when it comes to that front. Lois says, he's not here right now, he's a field reporter, he's mostly out on the road all the time. He just comes in every now and then and drops off his stories. A lot of people around the office haven't really talked to him because he comes and goes so fast, but I assure you, he's very real. Well, why don't you bring him along? I'd very much like to meet him. Now, I realise the idea of Clark Kent being a field reporter out on the road all the time and almost unknown to the Daily Planet workers, that seems like a weird decision, but stay with me because I am going somewhere with this. Over at the Kent's farm, Superman literally drops in on his mum, because while he lives in Metropolis now, he still flies over to do all of the back-breaking manual labour of running a farm that his elderly mother obviously can't do. They get talking, and his mum's kind of worried that he might be spreading himself too thin, because he's been out there saving people every single day and night, and between saving people, his Daily Planet job, his relationship with Lois, and he's helping her with the farm, she's worried that he might be pushing himself too hard. He says that he's okay because he can just recharge in front of the sun and then just keep going, but his mum's worried that he's still going to be emotionally drained from doing too much. She says, "You're doing so much, you know you don't have to prove anything to anyone." Well, actually, I do. After everything that happened with Zod, a lot of people wonder if they can trust me. I need to prove that they can. His mom gives him a hug and says, "Hey look, all you need to do is just keep being yourself, and in time, people will come to see you as you truly are." Clark flashes that big Superman grin to his mom, but his smile slowly starts to fade a bit. His mom notices and says, "It's Zod, isn't it?" He looks back at her. "I killed him, Mum. Every time my mind wanders, the memory of it comes back to me." "Well, it's a good thing you feel bad about it, but he really left you no choice." "I'm not so sure anymore." "Clark, what were you supposed to do? Just let him live?" "Maybe." Which is the exact opposite of what Jonathan Kent said in the last movie. We then cut to a video feed from an underwater sub, scanning the bottom of the ocean. We zoom out and we see Bruce Wayne watching the footage on this computer, and he has Nightwing standing next to him. I never actually intended to have Nightwing included in this, but there seem to be a bunch of rumours flying around about his involvement at the moment, so I've basically just swapped the Alfred character for Nightwing to cover that possibility. I don't really know who'll be playing him or if he'll even be in the movie, so I'm just going to use a picture from the comics to represent him. By the way, I don't know if they will have Alfred in this, but if they do, it'd be pretty awesome if Alfred could be played by Adam West. They're watching the recording from the submarine when this glowing orb fills the screen. Bruce Wayne sighs to himself and says, "I was really hoping that they wouldn't find anything. Normally people are happy when they're proved right, especially you. Well, not this time." He changes the display on the screen to a digital map of the world. This makes the second one of these things to open up. First on the island in the Pacific, and now this one at the bottom of the Atlantic. This is beyond coincidence. Something or someone is opening these things up. We need to know why, and I think I know where to find some answers. He brings up a photo of Superman on the screen. You think he has something to do with these things opening? Well, the only other time we've seen anything like this was when Superman sent Zod back through that portal. My gut's telling me that's what these things are. The reason I'm throwing this idea into the story is because it'll solve a problem that'll arrive later on, leading up to a Justice League movie. And it also doubles as a good reason as to why Batman would be somewhat suspicious of Superman. See, a problem leading up to the Justice League is, how are you going to explain where Wonder Woman or Aquaman come from, and still have it fit into the more real-world style that Man of Steel established? Because people just won't believe that Wonder Woman's entire civilization lives on an island that nobody has ever discovered before, or that Aquaman rules an underwater city that, again, nobody has ever found. However, Man of Steel established with the Phantom Zone that in this universe there are other dimensions and you can open up portals to them. So in this story that I'm creating, we'll have Wonder Woman's world in another dimension, but the portal that leads to it is on an island. Likewise, Aquaman's world is in another dimension, and the porthole leading to it is underwater. See what I'm doing? So it's kind of an easier leap for the audience to make, but it still retains the origin of where the worlds can be found, just with a slight twist. So Lois and Clark show up at Bruce Wayne's party, and Bruce Wayne is pretending to be drunk. And here we can get a little bit of that humor that was missing from Man of Steel. Bruce Wayne kind of stumbles over to the two of them, he says hi to Lois, and then he turns to Clark and he's like, "Oh, you must be the— oh my god! You look exactly like Superman." Really? "Yeah! That's uncanny, you look just like him. Everything except the glasses." He turns around, "Hey everybody! Everybody look at this guy! He looks exactly like Superman!" Lois then quickly jumps in and is like, "Mr. Wayne, I think you've had a bit too much to drink." "I'm just kidding. Come on, I'll take you on a tour of the place." And as they follow him, Lois and Clark kind of look at each other and they're like, "Wow, that was close." As he's showing them around the penthouse, we see Bruce Wayne discreetly swallow a pill. A few seconds later, he throws up in a pot plant because of the pill, and he keels over in a drunken state. Nightwing comes along and sort of drags him away, and as he does, Bruce kind of gives Clark like a drunken hug on the way past, in the process sticking a tracking device onto Clark's clothing. Later that night, Superman walks Lois home to her place, and they're sort of bantering back and forth with each other, the way that newly made couples do, so we can see that they're still in the honeymoon stage of their relationship. Often when the relationship between Clark and Lois is explored, it's about how him having to fly off to save the world all the time puts a strain on their relationship. That should not be in this movie. It should definitely be saved for further down the track in the next solely focused Superman film, where it can be properly explored. In this story, their relationship is in its early stages, where they have the love goggles on and everything seems perfect. They talk for a bit and Superman tells Lois that after what happened with Zod, he's made the decision that he will never again take another life and he will always find another way. Seriously, if Superman kills again in the upcoming movie, I'm gonna flip out, man. Lois says she's gonna fly out to Hawaii in the morning to cover the eruption of the volcano, but that she'll call him when she gets there. They say goodbye, Superman returns back to his city apartment, he changes into his Superman suit and he flies out the window. The camera then pans across and we see Batman on a rooftop a few blocks away, watching. Having followed the tracking device that he stuck on Clark Kent's clothing, he now knows that he is Superman. He watches Superman fly away in the opposite direction that he is about to go. At this point in the movie, it should have been woven into the story at some point that people don't yet know the full range of Superman's powers and abilities. Namely, his super hearing, his X-ray vision, and his freeze breath are not common knowledge, either by mentioning this in a news story or in general conversation. That way, Batman, in seeing Superman fly off in the other direction, has no reason to think that Superman will be able to see or hear him on the opposite side of town. Batman heads off and he infiltrates the military base where the scout ship is being held. And it would be good to actually see some of the ways that Batman does his ninja thing here. You know, previously we've just seen him sort of pounce on people from out of the shadows, but we don't get to see how he actually does what he does, his strategy, his tactics. So as he sneaks into the base, let's go a little bit Arkham Asylum. Let's see him clinging to the roof to avoid detection, crawling through vents, hacking into security doors, Metropolis, as this Batman is still considered to exist only as an urban myth, so has been able to go completely unnoticed until now. One of the guards that he sneaks past could perhaps be trying to like toast a hot pocket in the break room for a little bit of comic relief, having played by like Jack Black or somebody. Batman makes his way into Lex Luthor's office and he hacks into his computer. He finds all the stuff about the scout ship, downloads all that, but then he finds a separate file that he starts looking through, which is all about Bizarro. Batman has only a few seconds to look at it when an alarm goes off, not from Batman getting caught, but from Jack Black's hot pocket burning in the toaster and setting off the smoke alarm. This is a small detail, but it's necessary in order to have Batman be competent. The alarm doesn't go off because Batman makes a mistake and triggers it. It's just bad luck, because this Batman never makes a mistake like that. That's what separates him from the Christian Bale Batman. Now, I like the Christian Bale portrayal, but man, was that Batman stupid. You know, he got tricked by Talia al Ghul, by Ra's al Ghul, by Catwoman. He couldn't beat the Joker's plan. He got trapped inside his own burning house. He accidentally knocked Harvey Dent off the roof, killing him. Gets his back broken. Has his secret identity revealed by pretty much anyone that gets close to him. He even gets rejected by Katie Holmes. Katie Holmes! I could go on, but you get the point. This Batman is not going to be like that. He can see 10 steps ahead, he can predict every possible scenario, and he is always prepared. So in the few seconds the Batman has to read the stuff about Bizarro, he sees a few words like super soldier, possible military application, stuff like that. And he says to himself, they're breeding an army. Because that's what it looks like at a first glance, and he only has time for a first glance because the alarm goes off. So he quickly finishes downloading and he takes off. And with dozens of guards now running around all over the place, Batman doesn't have the option of sneaking anymore. So we can have a fight scene of him taking on a group of like 20 guards by himself. And this fight scene will not include any shaky cam. Enough with the shaky cam. You know, when shaky cam first came out in the Bourne Identity movie, it was a stylistic choice to show the speed and the precision of Jason Bourne's fighting skills. That's why it worked for those movies. But in no other situation should it be used. For those of us that grew up watching the 90s action movies, we know that half of the fun of the fight scenes was seeing the cool moves that they did, especially in the martial arts movies. But you can't get that anymore because everything's happening so fast and the camera's shaking around so much, you can barely even see what's happening. Where's the fun in watching that? There is a real art to shooting a fight scene. And I'm convinced that a lot of directors resort to shaky cam to hide the fact that they don't have the talent to film a fight scene properly. So they try to pass it off as, oh, it's gritty and real, it's not some choreographed dance routine, this is realistic. Yeah, maybe it is more realistic, but that's just not as much fun to watch in a movie. I would take a choreographed fight filmed by a stable camera any day of the week. Meanwhile, on the other side of Metropolis, Superman hears the alarm go off at the other side of the city, and he super speeds over there, X-rays the building, and sees Batman beating up all the guards. Cut to inside, Batman now rounds a corner to a hallway leading to the exit, and at the other end of the hallway is Superman waiting for him. Standoff. This is going to be the first of 2 fights that they're going to have in this story. The second will happen in the second half. Now remember that earlier Lex told Superman that people might try to break into the base to steal some of the technology in order to build weapons. And now here's Batman having broken into the base and stolen a bunch of information, so from Superman's perspective, Batman is the bad guy here. While on the other hand, based off what Batman has just seen in the files he took, it looks like Superman is helping them to breed an army of super soldiers. So from his perspective, Superman is the bad guy here. And as this Batman is always prepared, he does have a few tricks up his sleeve for Superman here. Batman goes for his sonic gun. Superman slaps it from his hand at super speed and pins him up against the wall. Batman sprays acid from his wrist into Superman's eyes, and while he's stumbling around blind, he slaps a bomb on his chest. Then Batman hightails it out of there because he's not an idiot. He knows that under these circumstances, the longer the fight goes on, the less chance he has of getting out of there in one piece. So he takes off out the door, but now Superman is angry, and he comes smashing through the wall after him with his eyes glowing red, and he just starts picking him up, throwing him around like a rag doll. Batman starts swinging punches, but Superman dodges them with his super speed, so Batman is just swiping at the air. Superman then stops, allowing himself to get punched one time. As this happens, we go into Superman's X-ray vision, and we see, as Batman's punch connects, the bones in his hands crack. After all, punching Superman is like punching a brick wall. Superman slams an open palm into his chest, and in X-ray vision we see 3 of Batman's ribs break. Batman hits the floor and slides back. Superman then slowly walks up, and he tries to X-ray his mask, but luckily Batman does have some lead in that mask, so Superman can't see through it. At that moment, a whole bunch of guards show up, and they're like, "Thanks, Superman, we can take it from here." We then zoom into Superman's ear, and we hear, "Help! Somebody help!" And Superman again is like, "I gotta go," leaving Batman there for the guards. They start to close in on him, and they say to each other, "Oh, I thought this guy was just a myth." Batman reaches under his cape, rips out a smoke grenade, and fires it off. The blast knocks back all of the guards for a second, and with only one hand and 3 broken ribs, Batman gets up and takes down all the rest of the guards, copping even more pounding along the way, but eventually overcoming. The scene ends with Batman limping off into the shadows, a battered and broken mess. But remember, this is just the first of 2 fights that they're going to have, and now Batman is getting away with a whole ton of information that he can use to find all of Superman's weaknesses to exploit. So round 2 will be very different indeed. We now return to the deep, dark recesses of Lex Luthor's secret research base, where Lex is now overseeing the transport of the scout ship, as since Batman broke into the base where it was being kept in Metropolis, he was able to convince the General to let him store it at his facility to keep it safe. So Lex now has all of the Kryptonian technology and Bizarro under one roof under his control. Not only that, but Lex has been experimenting on Bizarro in order to find out his weaknesses, and by extension, Superman's. So he has been throwing everything at Bizarro. He's been shooting him, stabbing him, burning him, drowning him, just to see how much he can take. Poor old Bizarro, who has now grown into an adult by the way, is just living the Theon Greyjoy existence. Oh yeah, this is not your bumbling toupee-wearing real estate scam-running Lex Luthor. No, this Lex is a psychopath, and he has no qualms about killing you if he sees an advantage to be gained out of it. I mean, this is the same character who in the comics murdered his parents just so he could inherit their money. That's the kind of guy Lex is. And to add an extra sinister level, the same technology that General Zod used to put Superman into that weird dream state, you remember where he was like sinking into the pit of skulls? That same technology Lex has now adapted to keep Bizarro in a constant dream state, so that he can experiment on him. However, in Bizarro's dream, Lex has fixed it so that it seems like Superman is the one that's hurting Bizarro, not Lex. So Lex is on the one hand learning all of Superman's weaknesses, and on the other hand training Bizarro to hate Superman. Diabolical. Lex is staring at Bizarro through this glass wall when his second-in-command approaches and hands him a tablet, because handing him a clipboard is way too low-tech. And it's got all the results from their tests on it. And it's full of technical jargon, but a few words sort of stand out. Red solar energy, unable to see through lead. And down at the bottom of the list we see substance K. She says, "We're ready to test that last one now if you want to observe." And a couple of lab guys walk in, open a box, and take out what we all recognize as kryptonite. But see, what they don't know is that since Bizarro is Superman's opposite, to him, kryptonite is like steroids. The Bizarro I have in this story is a bit different to his comic book counterpart. For one thing, in my version, he's not exactly a clone of Superman, as he is a misshapen and psychologically scarred Kryptonian. So him having Superman's desires to save people and Superman's love for Lois, like in the comic version, that doesn't really fit with this one. But having him be, in many ways, the reverse of Superman's, like in his reaction to kryptonite, is still possible. All we need is just one quick line later on, where one of the scientist guys just says to Lex that all their gear that they hooked up to grow him reverse the charges in his cells to opposite, so biologically he's the reverse of a lot of what Superman is. Hence why he breathes fire and he has freeze vision instead of the other way around. Yeah, I realize that's certainly not a bulletproof explanation, but who cares? It's good enough for what we need, and I'm taking some creative liberties here. I did consider having Lex take a DNA sample from Superman and splice it together with the egg, but why would he need to get a DNA sample from Supes if he already has a fully formed Kryptonian baby? Didn't make a lot of sense, so I just left that out. So when they put the kryptonite near Bizarro, instead of making him weaker, it jacks him up, so that he actually snaps out of the dream state that he's been in that has been keeping him subdued during all the experiments. And he busts out of the restraints, and he goes all Incredible Hulk, just ripping the place apart. Lex is partially buried under a pile of rubble. Meanwhile, back at the Daily Planet, Jenny Olsen is talking to Lois Lane on Skype, and has just finished telling her about the rumors of Batman being in Metropolis. Superman walks in to hand in a story, and sees Lois Lane on the laptop, laptop and says hello. At that moment, Perry White shouts, "Everybody, stop what you're doing and look at this." He turns on the TV and it's reporting about a monster tearing a path of destruction across the country, who we all know is Bizarro. Perry continues, "This is exactly what Mr. Wayne was talking about. We're the Daily Planet. We should already know about these things before they get on the TV. It's not good enough. We need to stay one step ahead of the news." Superman grabs the laptop and carries it away out of earshot. "You know, I have to draw that thing away from a populated area. The volcano's already been evacuated." She smiles. "Well, that's one way to keep one step ahead of the news." Bizarro's just kind of wandering around the suburbs looking at stuff when the military shows up and starts shooting at him. Then he flips out and begins tearing through them like they were tissue paper, leaving a trail of dead bodies behind him. Inside one of the tanks that Bizarro flips over is the General. He crawls out after Bizarro walks away. Superman flies in and lands next to him, and he tells Superman he's not going to stop. You know what you have to do. So now, Superman is in the same situation that he was in with Zod in the last movie, but this time he has sworn that he will not kill again. So Superman confronts him, and as soon as Bizarro sees him, he just goes ballistic. After all, this is the guy that he thinks has been hurting him for as long as he can remember. And he charges at Superman. Superman grabs him and they take the fight up into the air. And he flies them across country towards the volcano. Obviously, that's a really long distance to travel, even at super speed. So they smack down a couple of times along the way, you know, once in the woods so they can rip up trees and smash each other with them. Once in the ocean itself so that they can punch each other while they're underwater. This will be the only super-powered battle in the movie, so Zack Snyder can get all of his appetite for mass destruction out of his system on this without killing thousands of innocent people in the process. And for the finale, they land on the island right smack in the middle of the volcano and they fight each other while thigh deep in the lava, while Lois Lane films it from the helicopter that she's circling above him. It would look similar to this animated fight between Superman and Doomsday, but just swap Doomsday for Bizarro in your mind. You may ask, why have them fight in a volcano? Because 1, it would look awesome. 2, the area's already been evacuated. 3, it will serve to establish the volcano, which will play out in the second Batman-Superman fight. And 4, the volcano gives Superman an alternative to killing Bizarro. Right at the critical moment in the fight, with the volcano erupting and crumbling all around them, Superman picks up and throws Bizarro right into the heart of it, leaving him buried under thousands of tons of molten rock. Not enough to kill him, but enough to keep Bizarro restrained just for the time being, until Superman figures out a more permanent solution. Now remember that Superman said he could go without breathing in space if he's able to absorb enough solar energy. Likewise, Bizarro can't breathe while he's buried underground, but he just absorbed a whole lot of kryptonite energy, so he should be able to go without breathing while underground for quite a long time. We then cycle back to Batman in his Batcave, with one eye pouring through all of the info that he stole from Lex Luthor's office, and with the other eye watching the news report from Lois about what just happened at the volcano. Nightwing walks up. "Are you still going to go ahead with all this?" He points at all the LexCorp info on the screen. "It looks like things aren't quite what they seemed the last time you two met, so why do you still want to go ahead with this?" Batman looks at him. "Because it's the only way he'll know." Pressing a button, a wall slides open, revealing the mechanical bat suit that he used in Dark Knight Returns. I started designing it the very first day that he appeared, and now it's ready. But even in that, how long do you expect to last against him? Long enough. Back at Lex Luthor's now destroyed research base, Superman has tracked Bizarro's path of destruction back to that source, and he starts sifting through some of the rubble when he finds a half-working computer, hits a few buttons, and up comes a recording of Bizarro being blasted with lasers as one of the experiments, and Superman has this look of horror on his face. He then hears movement in the rubble, goes over and shifts some of the rocks, and finds Lex and pulls him out. "My God, what have you done here? You'll rot in prison for the rest of your days." Ha ha ha! "I don't think so, Superman. Everything I did here was under government contract. They've approved all of this." "What? But why? Why would they do this?" "Because you're an alien. It was my job to find out your weaknesses so we could take you down if you ever turned on us. You didn't need to do this. So what, we should just trust you? Face it. You don't belong here. This isn't your world. No one will ever trust you." Superman turns away with a haunted look on his face. After all, this is exactly what Jonathan Kent always said would happen. Superman turns back. "I won't rest until I bring you to justice for what you've done here. And I won't rest until the whole world sees you for what you really are. And thus, their rivalry is set, with both thinking they're in the right, and in a way, they both kind of are. Superman walks away, and the next thing we know, everything starts rumbling and shaking around. Lex runs out of the remains of the building just in time to see Superman flying off with the scout ship and disappearing into the distance. Superman lands it in the Arctic again, so that this can now become the Fortress of Solitude. We then have kind of like a collage of scenes, sort of like a Rocky training montage, of Superman in the Arctic working on the dream machine that Lex Luthor adapted, building to transform the scout ship into the Fortress of Solitude, carving new sections in the surrounding ice as extensions. We get a sense that Superman is now taking it up a notch, realizing that he will now need to have a home away from home to focus on honing his skills and understanding as much as he can about Kryptonian technology. He even gets one of those things working to be like his helper and to guard the fortress when he's away. And we can cut back and forth between Superman doing all this in his Fortress of Solitude to Batman working in his Batcave, testing his armor suit, preparing his plans for when he faces Superman. Both of them are hard at work, but for different reasons. This montage is also to show that some passing of time, several days, has taken place until we see both of them are ready. We then see Lois Lane stepping off a boat onto a jetty where there's already another boat tied on this small island that houses this giant mansion, all of which is owned by Bruce Wayne. Because yeah, he's a billionaire, he'd own his own island, right? Bruce Wayne arrives and he greets her because he's asked her to come here as the new boss to an employee. They exchange pleasantries for a bit, they sit down and they start to talk about Superman in a general kind of way. Because remember, Bruce Wayne knows that Clark Kent is Superman. After a bit, Bruce Wayne asks her, "Tell me honestly, do you think Superman can be trusted?" She looks back at him. "I would, and I have bet my life on that." Wayne seems satisfied with this. He gets up, says goodbye, and then leaves the island on his boat that was tied up next to hers, leaving only her and a few other workers that run the mansion on the island, and leaving her rather confused about why he wanted her to come all the way to his island, only to ask her that. He zips away over the waves, and when the driver of her boat tries to start the engine to ferry her back, guess what? It doesn't start. She asks the staff if there's any other boats around, and they say not until tomorrow afternoon when they expect Mr. Wayne to come back. She grabs her cell phone and says, "Oh, I better call the Daily Planet to tell him where I am." No reception. Looks like she's stranded there. Back in Metropolis, Superman goes to Lois Lane's house and he sees that Batman has staged a kidnapping of Lois Lane. In a note, he demands that Superman meet him in the abandoned town at the base of the volcano. He offers a trade, Lois Lane's location, in exchange for all of the information about the Super Soldier program. Now, I picked the abandoned volcano town as the epic showdown location, not just because it's abandoned, but also it would mimic the setting of the Dark Knight Returns fight, where the sky was blacked out from the nuclear fallout and it was snowing. But in this case, it's the volcano that's blacked out the sky with the ash cloud, and it's raining ash rather than snow. Plus, with all this volcano ash blocking out the sky, strategically, that is exactly what Batman wants in choosing this location. Because now Superman can't use the sun to recharge during the fight, because the ash cloud is blocking the sun. That's part of Batman's strategy. So, let's talk the details of that strategy. Yes, Batman fans, this is the fight that Batman will win, and I've taken elements from 3 different sources in the comics and mixed them all together to form Batman's plan. Those sources are Dark Knight Returns, obviously, Red Sun, and Tower of Babel. But first, we all know that all the Batman fanatics think that Batman will win instantly, all of the time, no matter what the circumstances are. And that's fine, but for those of us who are more balanced in our view, we know that Batman can and has in the past won against Superman, but one thing those encounters have shown us is that he does need certain circumstances in order to get those wins. I've narrowed those circumstances down to 3 different things, which when included in Batman's plans, multiply his chances of winning greatly. Number 1, home ground advantage. Batman needs to be able to pick when, where, and how the fight will happen. This of course also presupposes that he's had time to prepare, which I have allowed for in this version. Add to that the information of Superman's weaknesses from Lex's data that he stole, and the home ground advantage becomes very significant. Number 2, not 100%. Superman needs to be not at full power, either by being already weakened from a previous fight, or because he has to hold back for some reason. In my version, he has to hold back because if he just snaps Batman's neck, he'll never find out where Lois is. At least from his perspective, anyway. Number 3, secret weapon. Batman needs a secret weapon and ace up his sleeve to deliver that knockout blow to Superman. Obviously, kryptonite has filled this role several times before, and originally when I wrote this story I was gonna have it included in this fight, but as the story has progressed, it's just made a lot more sense for Lex to be the one to discover kryptonite rather than Batman, since Lex has an entire lab working on the problem and experimenting on Bizarro. And besides that, this Superman doesn't yet know that kryptonite is his weakness. So if that's the secret weapon, if that's how Batman wins against Superman, then that kind of robs him of a legitimate victory. Because under those circumstances, anybody in the whole world could defeat Superman if they can get kryptonite. So having Batman defeat Superman without kryptonite really shows that Batman is, as Superman has said in the comics, the most dangerous man alive. And it would demonstrate why Batman, a man with no superpowers, is qualified to be on the Justice League and stand as an equal beside gods. So in this version, for his secret weapon, I'm taking the inspiration from the Tower of Babel story. In that story, in case you don't know, his plan to take down Superman in that was to hit him with a special compound that basically turns Superman's skin transparent so that he cannot absorb sunlight, which is a brilliant idea, because that way, instead of having to try and break through all of Superman's powers, you instead just pull the plug and wait for him to power down. So this version differs a bit from the Dark Knight Returns fight, because instead of ending with Green Arrow shooting a kryptonite compound at Superman, it begins with Nightwing shooting a Tower of Babel compound at Superman. So Batman's plan here is a combination of this compound, the sun being blocked out by the ash cloud from the volcano, and a bunch of red solar lamps that he's set up all around the town where they'll be fighting. So the longer the fight goes on, the more Superman is going to be drained of his power until he is eventually just like a normal man, and then Batman can easily demolish him with his fighting skills. So Superman arrives, and Batman's first move is having all these missiles launch at Superman, and he takes a few hits that knock into the ground, and he is met by the Dark Knight in his battle armor. Tell me what I want to know, and I'll tell you where she is. There's nothing to know. There was only one super soldier, and he's gone now. You won't be able to create another one. The information will be useless if you try to sell it. Batman smiles. Yeah, I know. I didn't really care about any of the information. I already know. Lex Luthor was doing it behind your back. You didn't know anything about it. Superman looks shocked. If you already knew, then why did you take Lois? Why did you bring me here? Because that's what I do. I bring to justice people that others can't. Every man has to pay for their crimes, even a super one. Crimes? You broke into a military base, stole classified information, kidnapped an innocent woman. What's the difference between you and any other criminal? The difference is I do what the law can't. What do you do? Whatever you're told by someone in a uniform. Oh, so you're a freedom fighter. Why don't I believe that? And you're just a Boy Scout. Why don't I believe that? Look, just tell me where Lois is, and no one needs to get hurt. Well, I can see why you want her back so much. The two of you do make such a wonderful couple, Clark. But if you want her back, you're gonna have to earn it. All the red solar lamps turn on, and Superman's looking around like, what the? Then Nightwing from a rooftop shoots the compound. Superman catches it and it splatters all over him, seemingly doing nothing, as both the compound and the red solar lamps take a little bit of time to get going. And then, Bat Punch! The fight follows similar beats to the Dark Knight Returns fight. They throw each other through some walls. Nightwing rolls up in a tank, gets a few shots off before the tank is smashed. Superman rips the tank open and throws Nightwing out. During the fight, Superman's saying to Batman, "Tell me where she is! What have you done with her?" Because he doesn't know that she's actually just lounging around a pool underneath a palm tree, sipping a glass of champagne. But after Superman gets shot by the tank, we see him kind of cringe a little bit in pain. So we know that the compound is starting to work. Batman charges him, starts swinging punches, and during the fight Superman rips off Batman's helmet and grabs him by the collar for another punch and sees it's Bruce Wayne. Surprise! Batman grabs some panels from the back of his belt with wires attached and he shoves them to Superman's temples, electrocuting him, pumping thousands of volts of electricity through Superman's brain. Superman knocks him back with his heat vision, but now Superman is starting to slow down. He's breathing heavier, he's starting to stagger a bit, so Batman keeps up his attack. Like a shark tasting blood, closes in on Superman. Fists are flying, they're trading blows back and forth like two prize fighters wearing each other down. Batman gradually starts to land more and more punches until finally he beats Superman down to a knee and then knocks him to the ground with a ruthless kick right in the face. Staring down at Superman, Batman can give that epic Dark Knight Returns speech.
You're feeling it now, aren't you? What the rest of us live with every day. Your own mortality.
Don't worry, you won't die. The toxin will work its way out of your system in time. I want you to remember that. In all the years to come, in your most private moments, I want you to remember the one man who beat you. It's difficult to do that Batman voice. As we slowly zoom out from the big fight, we fade out, and we go back to the media reporting about Superman's fight with Bizarro, and they interview a couple of people on the street, and we can see that people's attitudes are starting to change about Superman. They're starting to view him more as the protector, as the guardian of humanity. Many people are saying, with everything Superman's been doing to protect people, yeah, I want him to stick around. The next day, Clark and Bruce Wayne arrive on the island together, and Clark reunites with Lois. I'd like you to meet a friend of mine. Yeah, I know who he is. No, you don't. Bruce Wayne says, a lot of people know me as Batman. Bruce and Clark walk off together and start talking. You know, we could have just talked everything out. Kinda seems like you went out of your way to start a fight. Were you really that keen for some payback? It wasn't just about payback. It was the only way I could get the message through to you. See, I believe you're one of the good guys, and I have a feeling that we're going to be needing you soon. But if you're going to be our protector, you also need to realize how vulnerable you can be. You know, if I can learn your identity, discover your weaknesses, and take hostage those close to you, then others can as well. You need to be smarter, more secretive. You need to create a smokescreen to hide who you really are, not just for your own protection either. It's a bit too late for me to go around wearing a mask. The best mask? Hiding in plain sight. Yeah, you seem to do a good job of that with the whole party boy thing. Well, you know, perhaps your Clark Kent could use a little bit of tweaking. You think I should start drinking and passing out in the streets? No, nobody would believe that about you. I think you should perhaps go in the other direction. As Batman is saying this, we transition into Clark walking into the Daily Planet, bumping into things and apologizing in that Christopher Reeve kind of style that we know. Excuse me, Mr. White? Ah, it's you. I was wondering if we'd ever get to meet properly. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about, sir. I was wondering if I could have any office jobs, if there were any available. I've been on the road so much, yeah, I wouldn't mind settling down. I'm sure we could arrange something. This is the reason why I've had Clark Kent be a field reporter out on the road all the time, and as a result, unknown to any of the Daily Planet workers. It was so that he can come back for an office job there in the Daily Planet, acting out the role of the bumbling Clark Kent, applying the wisdom that Batman has taught him about secret identities. Because if he was already working in the Daily Planet as the cool guy, that wouldn't work. Sometime later, we see Superman and Bruce Wayne walking into the Fortress of Solitude together. Bruce Wayne looks around and says, I like my place better. It's more cozy. Superman smiles and leads him over to the Dream Machine. So this is what you want me to have a look at, huh? Yeah, I can't really calibrate it properly. You're good with gadgets. Can you ever go? I'll give it a shot. Our final scene, we then cut to this strange scene of Bizarro lying on red sand. As he sits up, everything around him flashes white for a second, and his surroundings suddenly transform into a beautiful paradise, but still with a kind of weird look to it. He stands up and he gets this big grin on his face as he looks around, and he runs off happily to explore this new world. We zoom out and cut to the Dream Machine floating in orbit around Mars. Yes, Superman has left Bizarro on Mars, and he's calibrated the Dream Machine so that Bizarro can continue to live on Mars in this dream world that's not real, but at least he can be happy there. This kind of fits with what Superman did for Bizarro in the comics, where he built a whole Bizarro world for Bizarro to live. Now look, I realise this idea does kind of push the boundary of believability a bit, but often a film can't get away with pushing that boundary if it's the last thing you see in the movie. And besides, by the time we get to a Justice League, we're going to then have Martians, magic, mythical godlike figures, so this will probably be the least of the weirdest things. But it could actually help to ease the audience into these very strange waters that the Justice League is going to go. Now you might be asking yourself, how can Bizarro survive when he's on Mars? After all, he doesn't have any more kryptonite to keep him alive while he's there. Well, remember in Man of Steel, they made a point that Superman took some time, but he could adapt to live in Earth's environment that was not his native environment. So likewise, Bizarro would be able to, over time, adapt and breathe the atmosphere there on Mars. As for what he would eat and drink while he's there, I don't know. Maybe Superman can fly in supplies for him or something every now and then. Doesn't really matter, does it? We can overlook that, right?
So we started the movie with Superman floating out in space being haunted about killing Zod and that mistake he made, and now we end with Superman floating in space having corrected that mistake in sparing Bizarro's life, showing that he's come full circle and he's now ready to be the hero that the world needs. And this is a feat that was only accomplished because he and Batman worked together on it. This shows why Batman and Superman are always stronger when they work together, because they can get stuff done that neither of them could do otherwise on their own.
And that, my friends, is the end. End credit scene! Haha! You thought it was over? Oh no. You remember how I brought up that thing of Batman investigating portals that were opening all over the world, and then it was dropped immediately from the story? So in the end credits scene, we see Superman and Batman standing side by side in the middle of nowhere, where one of these portals is opening up right there in front of them, and out steps Wonder Woman.
Oh, and by the way, the other porthole that was underwater, that leads to Aquaman. But that would be for the next movie.
So, that's it. If you managed to make it all the way to the end of this video, I congratulate you. I hope this has gotten you psyched up for the movie, because I'm certainly keen to see what will happen in it. And if anything that I've covered here is actually going to play out in the movie. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate the support of all you guys.
And if you did like this video, do me a favor, share it with some of your friends.
And as always, comment below. And be sure to subscribe to my channel and like me on Facebook. See you later.